Hurricane Sally gathers strength in the Gulf as smoke from the wildfires in the west now envelops much of the United States. Could there really be life on Venus? A major discovery in space and a TV-only Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for September 15th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo!
Welcome back. We've missed you. How are you?
I am good. I'm all moved in to my new house.
No more living with the in-laws. That must feel great.
It's nice to have my stuff back. I didn't realize how I'd been just living out of a bag and kind of rotating the same few shirts and stuff every day. And it's nice. It's nice to, have a house and whatnot. But it's chaotic and crazy and filled with hiccups and unforeseen things that happen, I guess, when you own a home.
Oh, yes, yep. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you back. Baker held down the fort, but it's good to have the band back together.
Thank you. And you know what? You guys did a great job. I listened almost every day, actually. And you and Baker, it was great.
Thank you.
All right, let's get to some news, though. Hurricane Sally, now a Category 2 storm, slowly churning toward the Gulf Coast with an expected landfall somewhere along Mississippi to Alabama. And the western Florida panhandle tomorrow. Now, because this system is moving so slowly, the biggest threat here is storm surge, rain, and that means potentially historic flooding. So this is, Carlo, what made Hurricane Harvey so bad a few years ago in Houston. It's just that storm moved so incredibly slowly that you just had days of rain. So that could be really dangerous. So don't, the danger here is that you'll hear Category 2 and think, oh, it's not a 4 or 5, but this could potentially be devastating.
Because that storm that hit New Orleans a few weeks ago was a 4, but it was trucking. Remember how fast that thing was going, and that was one of the things I think that kept it from being like an absolute catastrophe. It is September 15th, which means the Atlantic hurricane season is officially at its peak. We're halfway through. There are 6 tropical cyclones currently in the Atlantic Ocean, which is just unbelievable. So once Wilford is named, which is the last one, then we go to the Greek alphabet. The only other time we ever had to do that was back in 2005. That was the Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita year.
I remember that year. I was working on the NBC network desk, and it felt like every day there was this every week there was a new massive hurricane churning. Also on the climate beat, President Trump visiting Northern California attributed the wildfires out there solely to poor forest management, basically poo-pooing the effect of climate change. He said, quote, "I don't think science knows what is happening and that it would, quote, start getting cooler." All part of a pretty tense confrontation with Governor Gavin Newsom. Joe Biden now calling Trump a, quote, climate arsonist, saying that the real threat to the suburbs isn't crime, but the effects of climate change. Smoke from the western fires has spread across much of the country with a noticeable haze settling over D.C. and New York City. In related news, we should note this new government report, which shows that the Northern Hemisphere saw its warmest summer in modern history, according to NOAA, surpassing records that were set in 2019, so not that long ago, in 2016. The average global surface temp in August was 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit, above the 20th century average. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but Moshe was actually on, Moshe Wanunu was on when you were off, and he made, a couple months ago, and he made this great analogy. He said, imagine you had a fever, right? And you were a fever of just, 101 degrees or whatever it is, and how out of whack you feel, right? Well, that's only the difference of a couple of degrees, but it makes a huge difference in your body, and you could think of the earth kind of like that as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, one of the things that I just don't get about the president's insistence on denying climate change, just like from a political standpoint, it was stupid enough when there were politicians 10, 15 years ago doing it. But like, guys, this is not a debatable thing anymore, right? I'm not saying the forest management, there isn't also an issue with these fires. Frankly, I don't know enough about that subject to say. But to deny climate change in, September of 2020, when we've got historic fires, historic heat, 5 or 6 tropical storms in the Atlantic, temperatures hotter in the Arctic than Miami earlier this year. It was 130 degrees in Death Valley last month, hottest summer on record, as you just mentioned. It's like it's so ridiculous. And from a political standpoint, this is the issue when you poll young Americans. I'm talking about, like, 18 to 26-year-olds. This is the issue they care about over everything else. And the Republican Party is just kneecapping themselves by ignoring it. Those kids. First of all, they can already vote. If they're not voting yet, they're going to. There was a Battleground poll a couple of weeks ago that I bookmarked because had such a fascinating, it was such an interesting take on this, and it sort of didn't get reported in the media. But among possible 2020 voters in this poll who have turned 18 since 2016, Biden led 94-6.
Wow.
I mean, again, that's not going to be meaningful in this election because this is a cohort of people who just don't vote that much yet. But this is a looming disaster for the Republican Party, and I don't know if they appreciate it. And climate change is a big part of that.
Climate change and gun violence too.
Yeah.
Guns in schools. We didn't grow up worrying, or I didn't grow up worrying that someone was going to come in with guns and shoot kids shoot me while I was in school. But for kids now, that is a reality. We saw with the Parkland kids who really mobilized after the shooting there. I think gun violence is a huge issue for younger people. And I also think it's like, can we stop having these either or things? I mean, the president is right that part of the issue, and scientists would say part of the issue with the wildfires is poor forest management. But it's a combination of things. It's poor forest management combined with climate change. Our hurricanes, right? More people are living on the coast. That is happening, right? So more people are impacted by hurricanes. They're also being made worse by climate change. Can we stop saying it's this either or thing?
Yeah.
And to that note, what struck me when this quote that we pulled from Joe Biden saying that the real threat to the suburbs was not crime but climate change. You know what? Crime is a threat, right? Like, crime everywhere is getting worse. Don't downplay. Just because climate change is really this existential threat, it doesn't mean that crime isn't something that affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So I think we have to be able to say that some of these problems are a little bit more all-encompassing, and that there's many factors. It's not just these black and white issues. I want to switch gears and talk about a really cool and big discovery in space. For decades, scientists believe that Venus is about as inhospitable to life as any planet in the inner solar system. And here's why. It averages 870 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface. The whole planet is covered in clouds that rain sulfuric acid. But now a group of astronomers say that they have discovered a chemical called phosphine in Venus's atmosphere, and they believe that could only be created by a living organism.
Yeah, this was a big announcement yesterday, and they need to do more research, and they aren't working with actual samples from this of this chemical, right? Because there's no like space things out there gathering samples. It's just these telescopic images. But the suggestion is essentially that, our closest neighbor, which is Venus, could harbor this microbial life in its clouds, and that would be a big deal. But it doesn't mean like we're going to be moving to Venus anytime soon, right? I mean, if for no other reason than anytime humans have ever tried to send a probe onto the surface of Venus, it's been immediately crushed and melted by the atmosphere. But nevertheless, I'm not trying to poo-poo it. I'm just saying, it's not. We ain't going there. But still, the fact that there may be even, anaerobic organisms living in the clouds would be a major discovery.
I just watched Away, that new Netflix show with Hilary Swank. I don't know if you've seen them.
No,
trying
I don't
to
think so.
advertise it. She's basically leading this group of astronauts who goes to live on Mars. It's in theory nothing like I'd ever be interested in. It is so good. I highly recommend it.
I was going to say, really. What's it called, Away?
It's called Away. It stars Hilary Swank, and she leads this international coalition of astronauts, one from China, Russia, and it got me really interested in space. I've always been interested in space, and I love looking at the stars, and I love being outside. You know, I happen to love space normally, but
Right.
all of a sudden I'm like, Elon Musk, you're not so crazy thinking we're all going to be living on Mars soon.
Well, we may need to be going somewhere.
Excuse me, on the tech front, some more clarity on the TikTok-Oracle arrangement. I know you guys talked about this a lot yesterday, you and Baker. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin now confirming that Oracle will take over TikTok's U.S. operations. This deal will be presented to President Trump this week. This deal is less of a sale, though, than it is an undefined hosting partnership. Okay, so that's a really important distinction. It remains unclear how this agreement between TikTok and Oracle will actually be protecting the national security threat that the White House says is posed by TikTok's Chinese roots. But Carlos, Steve Mnuchin saying this deal is going to create 20,000 jobs in this country and a U.S. headquarters for TikTok.
Yeah, that when he said that yesterday, my antenna immediately went up. That seems awfully aspirational. I mean, even if this were a sale, right, and this company was essentially moving to the United States, that's an extremely lofty number for a software company. I mean, Facebook has like 50,000 employees, but they're, gigantic. It just seems like 20,000. I don't know where that number came from. So I don't know what kind of fuzzy math they're up to there. I would just be skeptical of that. But look, the bottom line of all this appears to be that the social network is going to continue to operate in the United States, at least for now. Honestly, I'm just not sure what this was all about. We were told this platform was such a national security risk that it had to be either banned or sold, and we're doing neither of those things. It's just this sort of like vague partnership with a U.S. tech company now. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, but it doesn't really seem like it's like the outcome is what we were told was going to happen.
And Carlo, I do want to point out that the CEO of Oracle, the chairman, Larry Ellison, he is a Trump supporter, one of the rare Trump supporters in Silicon Valley. I just think that it is worth noting whether or not that played a role here. It's certainly worth mentioning.
I suspect it probably did.
Yeah. Sticking with the tech beat, for the first time since Steve Jobs took that first iPhone out of his pocket in front of a rapturous crowd, Apple's going to be unveiling some new products without an in-person audience. That virtual event starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Apple watchers are expecting some refreshed iPads, Apple Watches, and possibly some new accessories.
But no iPhone. The iPhone 12 expected to get its own event next month. This is usually when they unveil the new iPhones, but there's all these supply chain hiccups this year, so I think it's been delayed. I usually, Jill, I'm not as we've discussed, I'm not like a I don't know, like one of these like Apple fanboys who like goes out and waits online for the new iPhone. But I think I am going to splurge on the new one when it comes out. Mine is really on its last legs over here. And Jill, I thought of you this weekend because I lost my friggin' AirPods for the first time.
Oh, no.
Yes. And now I am reminded why I didn't ever want to get them to begin with when you were telling me how great they are, because losing a little piece of plastic that costs $250 sucks. It sucks. It's so bad. And I'm so annoyed at myself. It's totally my fault. I just I had them in my pocket when I was out on Saturday, and they're just nowhere to be found.
So what did you go on, like one bender? You actually went out and drank a little, and
I did.
Then you lost your AirPods.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that is exactly what happened. And I think I was at my friend's house and I lost them, and I thought they were in a couch cushion, but they're not. They don't show up on that Find My iPhone app. So someone's got a nice pair of $250 AirPods that belong to me out there in New York City, and enjoy them.
I'm sorry, Carla, that does suck. But you should have gotten the less expensive ones. They're like $150, which also is painful to lose.
Yeah.
But finally, we just want to end here by mentioning that the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is going to look a lot different this year. Organizers have announced some major changes to this iconic American tradition, of course, all in response to the coronavirus pandemic. So it's the first time the event will look different in almost 100 years. There will still be balloons, but they're going to be paraded on cars rather than with handlers. The parade is going to take place over 2 days with no live spectators, and no one under 18 will be included. Meaning one of the best parts, that high school marching bands, that's going to be nixed.
This really bummed me out yesterday. I gotta say, sometimes these stories hit, and you just sort of like, whatever, like that's just 2020 for you. This one, but then every once in a while, they're just like they just remind you like what a weird time we're in, and like how much this year is just a major bummer. And this was one of those for me. I mean, to me, the best part of the Thanksgiving Day parade is those marching bands. And if you've ever worked or lived in Midtown Manhattan, the week of Thanksgiving, it's one of those little like pleasures of living here. You get to see these like bus loads of excited kids, like these wide-eyed high school kids coming to the city from rural Pennsylvania and Ohio and places where they've probably never been to New York before. And they're just sort of like running around like maniacs, having the time of their lives. And that was just like, I always enjoyed that. And I guess we're not going to get it this year, but look, I understand why. And it is what it is. But I guess at least there will be balloons. At least Alex will get to see the balloons on TV, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's unfortunate, but I for years, I used to go when I was at CBS. One of our producers had an apartment that overlooked Central Park West, where they would blow up the balloons the night before. So she would have everybody over, and so you would just watch them blowing up the balloons, and it was fun, obviously for us, but also a lot of my coworkers would bring their kids, who would just kind of like be glued to the like face stuck at the window, trying to look at these things, and it's sad, right? Everyone has their things. For us, it was college football, too. In my household, that was a big deal. But yeah, the Thanksgiving Day parade is such a tradition. And I'm curious what it's going to look like. Maybe there will be some things, and it'll look better. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be a tough Thanksgiving. I mean, this is, it's going to be a tough fall, and I think it's going to be a tough winter. But hey, we've made it this far, Jill. So.
Well, the Jewish New Year is coming up. I want to quickly mention. When this pandemic started, it was right around Passover. And I remember thinking, okay, so we're just not doing Passover this year. Everyone was doing like virtual or, Zoom Seders.
Right.
The fact that we're now, in September at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we're still not really able to get together with our families, it's just those, that hits me particularly hard.
Totally.
It's like we're still going through it. All right, on that very depressing note, why did we end on such a depressing note on my first day back, Carlo?
I'm sorry. That's my fault. But I'm happy. I'm in a good mood today. You're back. It's good to have you back. It feels a little more normal around here.
All right, you know what? I read this quote that said, every day you have a decision that you can wake up and just decide that you want to be in a good mood. And I've been following that because it actually, it's true, right? Like, you don't need to be bummed about everything. You can just make a decision.
Spoken like somebody who just came back from time off.
Yeah, talk to me tomorrow. Exactly. Okay, everybody, that's what you need to know for Tuesday, September 15th.
See you guys.